Welcome everybody to our playground design presentation. I'm Adam Moore, the City of Milwaukee's project manager for the development of Scott Park, Bowman Bray Park, and Belfort Park. During our planning process for these three parks, we heard a lot about play concepts like inclusive play, nature-based play, sensory play, as well as topics like playground accessibility, safety, maintenance, and cost. Tonight's presentation will look at our panelists' lessons learned from past projects and is designed to give everyone a base level of understanding of these concepts and consideration. We will not be looking at specific design for our three parks, but rather trying to provide all of you with enough information so that you can give us informed feedback as we move into the final round of engagement, which will be held between October 6th and October 19th. For more information on how to attend the planning meetings of each of these three parks, please go to the city's website at milwaukeeoregon.gov/meetings. And if you live in the 97222 zip code, watch your mailbox for a postcard. We will be using both the chat and question and answer function here in Zoom. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the question function. If I'm able to respond to the question, I will, although we might need to save the question until the end of the presentation for our panelists. That's so that we can ensure that we get through all the information. Also, we will be recording this presentation and posting it on our website for future viewing. And with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. With us tonight, we have Jennifer Devanzo, our lead consultant for Greenworks, Stephanie Brown from GR Morgan Construction, and Ben Johnson, the chair of Milwaukee's Parks and Rec Board. I should note that Ben also works as a associate principal, give you a promotion there, Ben, of Greenworks. But tonight he's joining us as a PARB member, Milwaukee citizen, and a volunteer. With that, panelists, would you like to introduce yourself a little more?
Yep. Thanks, Adam. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm Jennifer Devanzo. I'm a landscape architect at Greenworks. And as Adam said, I'm the lead for the project and the project manager on the project. So I will pass it off to Stephanie. She's also on the project. So you're on mute.
There we go. Hi, I'm Stephanie Brown. I'm with GR Morgan Construction. I'm a project manager and also a certified playground safety inspector. So I've been asked by Greenworks to consult once we get into the design phase. So tonight I'll just be contributing as a contractor and from the construction side of things.
Thanks, Stephanie. Ben?
Yeah, hi, everybody. Like Adam said, I'm Ben Johnson, and I am currently the chair of the Milwaukee Parks and Recreation Board that I've been on for the last 6 years. I see several people in the audience that are current PARB members and past PARB members, as well as city councilor and city staff. So super excited to be here tonight and talk with you all about some lessons learned. I've been practicing park design and landscape architecture in the region for the last 22 years, and really in the last 10 focusing a lot on kind of the niche market of nature play and inclusive play. So that's why they roped me in for this. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Ben. So tonight we're going to look at a couple of these terms that you hear a lot: universal design, inclusive design, and we'll look at elements of inclusive design, nature play, and elements of nature play, considerations when thinking about nature play as well as other playground types, and then we'll look at a park example. So universal design is a process that enables and empowers diverse populations by imploring human performance, health and wellness, and social participation. So this is a definition from the Center for Inclusion and Environmental Access. One thing to note is universal design did not pertain just to outdoor spaces. It really encompasses everything from materials and buildings. And then in 1997, the Center for Universal Design came up with 7 principles of universal design, mainly for indoor use. So equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, size and space for approach and use. So just thinking about those concepts, people that have different capabilities and flexibilities, and whether they can understand certain signage in a park, so just or in a building, but just keeping all that in mind. And then playgrounds are typically, or playgrounds are required to be ADA compliant, and ADA compliance is the bare minimum. And inclusive design derived from the principles of universal design, where inclusive design is taking ADA compliance a step a lot further. So one thing I just wanted to let you all know is we've had some really great discussions with our focus groups. One of them is with people with disabilities, and some things that we're hearing from them, not so much in the play realm, but where it's taking it a step further is, one thing is signage. They want to see more signage about that this playground is for all, no bullying, and then also drinking fountains, thinking about a handle on a drinking fountain, and thinking it would be better accessibility if it was a push button rather than a handle. There's also a handle for restrooms. And then when you're looking at restrooms, not just having it for a wheelchair accessible person, but also their caretaker. So just some other things that we're hearing that would take ADA a step further. So for this presentation, one thing that, so we're just focusing mostly on inclusive play, and the playground industry has developed their understanding of universal design for outdoor environments, and they've coined this term inclusive playground. So when you hear universal design, inclusive playground, or inclusive design, they're synonymous. So, and we really resonated with Landscape Structures definition of inclusive playground, which is a universally designed, sensory-rich environment that enables all children to develop physically, socially, and emotionally, and an engaging place that provides the just right level of challenge and offers opportunities to succeed. A well-designed place that addresses all levels of ability, a place that goes beyond minimum accessibility to create a play experience that meets variety of needs and interests. At an inclusive playground, children of all abilities can interact with each other and do what all kids want to do, play. So below are some keys to inclusive play that are adapted from universal design principles. And these keys are to ensure we're providing all ages and all abilities. I'm going to go through each one in the next series of slides, so I won't read all these. So the first one is engaging for all abilities and not having boring design. The main feature and elements must be fun for typically developing children at most. That goes here in, sorry, for developing children. It doesn't have to look or feel like a playground designed especially just for disabilities. It can be really fun. And then we also need to think about all ages and abilities. So multiple levels of challenge, climbing, balancing, elevation changes. There can be a lot of variety in a small area. For example, the mound on the left and on the far right, this one, has so many ways to get up and down. And the wood stack has many challenges for easy to hard, and can be in small areas where players can play together and feel like they belong. Accessible playground surface, we're going to talk a lot more about this later on, but just as one of the keys to inclusion, consistent surfacing would include poured-in-place rubber, synthetic turf, or poured-in-place rubber tiles. And so on the left, you'll see the support in place rubber, as well as the synthetic turf, and then the turf tiles on the right. And then what's nice about the different materials is they can help delineate different zones of play. Perimeter containment, so fencing surrounding the play area, helps ensure children can stay within the play area, and others, it also provides a way that children that have autism, they might be overstimulated and may have the fear, the anticipation to run, but this would contain them within the space. Orientation path. So the orientation path gives children with sensory issues or autism a way to get to know the playground before they jump into and play, and a safe place to jump out and seek refuge if they are feeling overstimulated. So the coolest thing in the playground has to be accessible. So the coolest thing, on the photo to the left, there's an accessible route that's integrated into the mound that goes around the tree to an extra wide bridge that makes its way between the trees and to the perch that's overlooking the playground. And then the image on the right, there's a lot of features at ground level and all around the features, so everybody has the opportunity to play and feel included. Sensory, so sound, feel, color, texture, smell. These, by providing sensory features of touch and smell and taste and see and hear, really adds to the ground level play as well as character. These features can be musical instruments, art, natural materials, topography, and plantings. And the textures and the colors can also help define space and edges as well. So movement, we have swinging, sliding, spinning, provides a great way for children to engage their vestibular system, which is also known for their balance system, which helps developing children gain balance and spatial awareness. Cooperative play. So when children engage with each other, they gain skills they'll need later to collaborate and cooperate at school and in other typical social settings. A child at the ground level in this photo on the left can communicate through the tube with another child that's located up in the fort. And then the natural materials on the right are materials that can be, children can work together to build structures, which is helpful for cooperative play. Quiet places. We all like quiet places, so incorporating quiet places like the slug structure on the left under a play structure or on its own can be helpful for children that would like to seek refuge, or if they're feeling overstimulated. And then in the image on the right shows a quiet space that's outside the play area. And social spaces. So these social spaces provide areas for caregivers to observe, play, and engage. So the top photos, it's just showing a snippet of the photo without children or adults in it, and then you can see the one next to it on the right is an activated space. And then the one on the bottom is not only for social, or where parents or caregivers can look on or engage with the kids. It's also used as an outdoor classroom. So the next set of slides, Ben Johnson is going to talk about where we dive deeper into nature play, which is one of his areas of expertise. So Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Nature play in urban environments really took off about 15, 17 years ago when Richard Louv wrote the book Last Child in the Woods and coined the term nature deficit disorder, recognizing that children are getting out in nature less and less because of the draw of technology and our culture changing from our grandparents roaming circles back in the day where they used to ride their bike and travel miles to their relative's pond, to now where kids barely will leave their neighborhoods unchaperoned. So kids are getting out less and less, and the nature play really allows children to explore the natural world through play in a safe environment close to home. So nature play can really be interpreted on a scale or a continuum, from anything from nature themed equipment that's built in a factory like on the left to unstructured play in nature on the right. The latter happens less and less, and not all children have equitable access to nature, and so do not have that opportunity to have that unstructured play in nature. So, from my experience, I've found in these more urban playgrounds that we've worked on is projects that kind of are in the middle, that combined natural features and elements with structured traditional play equipment are really a great way to provide deliberate play experiences and has a really, really high play value. And what that means is a high play value means that the play features are very engaging and for diverse users for long periods of time and repeat use. So similar to inclusive play, nature play really has the opportunity to hit all these wonderful fundamental childhood development components that I'll quickly go through. So climbing is kind of the go-to play, fundamental play component that is found both in traditional and nature play, and it's one of the most common. And it encourages movements, builds strengths, balance, and coordination. Sensory play. This is often missing in a traditional playground environment, and that we really want to target auditory, visual, smell, tactile experiences. And it engages development of language and motor skills and supports cognitive growth, curiosity, as well as social interaction. Social play, Jennifer described this pretty well. It really encourages social interaction through group play. It fosters kind of open-ended, imaginative play, cooperation, teamwork, and a sense of belonging and friendship. Emotional play, this is one that's really a little less easy to spot, but it encouraged children to test their limits and provide a sense of self-mastery. I witnessed this when my son's there in the pink pants hanging onto the rope on the right. I witnessed this when this Westmoreland first opened up. He was very intimidated about climbing to the top of this boulder structure, and he would make his way around in the circuit just about 2 feet up high. But then when he, after a couple of visits, he came with his friends and found a route up to the top and watched them go, and really wanted to. He saw the risk, assessed it himself, and decided he was ready to go, and he did it. And the light bulb started going off for me from like a playground design of like what that really meant from an emotional play standpoint. And it was quite wonderful to see. Cognitive play requires elements of learning opportunities of varying complexity to promote intellectual development. This often requires also a level of challenge and risk. Oh, sorry, that was a note from my other one. It does not involve challenge and risk. That's the next slide. Sorry about that.
So this next part of the presentation, we're going to talk about considerations and nature play versus traditional play, but also just talking about different areas of warranty, risk, safety, maintenance, the life cycle of materials, childhood development, and cost. So Stephanie and Ben are going to tag team on this one. So the first side, Ben's going to talk about risk versus hazard.
Yeah, this often comes up when agencies are designing and building their first nature play areas. And the real key to this is risk is good and hazard is bad. Risk is a way children can see a challenge in front of them and self-assess and learn and master their own abilities and gain confidence. Like, for example, if there was a child that, like my son, wanted to climb up to the top of that rock mound and wanted to, and was afraid to jump off, but then that's a perceived challenge, and he would be taking that risk to do that. A hazard is bad. A hazard is something that is not perceived. It could be anything from, I'm going to use kind of scary examples, but imagine if like glass shards, or there was a rock that was hidden underneath the wood chips. If my son or a child were to jump off of that rock pile and hurt themselves from something that they did not see, or get caught entangled in the log scramble, which they could not see, but then fell into it. So those would be hazards. So in design for nature play areas, we look for opportunities to create risk at multiple levels while eliminating hazards. And not only eliminating hazards in the design phase, but in the construction phase as well, which Stephanie will be talking a little bit about.
Stephanie is going to talk to us about safety.
Thank you. So to begin, safety is important in any playground projects, but particularly we have seen the need for lots of people to be involved when we're designing these natural playgrounds or hybrid, where you have manufactured equipment in addition to custom design. So the designers, contractors, if you have inspectors, clients, everyone is going to use the ASTM standards, which are technical standards that they put together as guidelines for playground equipment. And also the CPSC, Playground Safety Handbook. They're very similar. They touch on a few different things, but these are used to guide the design and implementation so that anything that is custom created can be parallel or matching to things that are manufactured in a factory. So as you can see in this slide on the right down below, an example of the log climber that was produced, which is in the photo above in real life. So in the design, everything is covered, right? We see the concrete footings, we see the attachment methods, anchoring devices, all of the components that go in, the engineering and the thought, making sure that that intended use will be appropriate and again, match the guidelines comparable to manufactured equipment. On the left, you can see the highlighted purple areas. So this is a very important thing, as Ben mentioned, with risks and hazards. So having spaces that are too close together can pose definitely a hazard when children are jumping off things and having, interactions with kids playing on other components. So the purple areas in this design show those use zones or safety zones, as we call them. So during construction, making sure that as we're building, we are taking those into account. The other part you can see on the left-hand side, the swings are off to the left. That's important during design, just to make sure that swinging and sliding activities are separate as far as the route, so that they're not directly in front of another high activity component. And the last thing about safety zones has to do with fall protection. So falls can be up to 80% of the injuries that we see on playgrounds. So in addition to having all of these safety zones taken care of. There really is an important focus on safety surfacing materials during the design process to make sure that liability and maintenance are kept to a minimum there. And my next slide. All right.
Your next slide, slides.
Perfect. Slides. Okay, so slides, embankment slides in particular, are very common in natural play designs. It's a way to incorporate manufactured element and also the natural elements at the same time. So experience in the industry has shown that sliding and swinging are best represented by manufactured equipment. But as you can see here in the slides, left, middle, and right, you have boulders, plantings, artificial turf, combination of all those things, wood chips or rubber, poured in place surfacing at the bottom. The beauty of these slides is that because they don't have the need for safety surfacing on the left and right directly across, you can incorporate all these other elements of nature in there, like these climbing boulders. So the important safety consideration though is down on the bottom right, you can see that there is this person depicted in the center of the slide space. And then you can see this gray shadowed area, which they call the non-encroachment zone. And it represents the arm motion that a child or even an adult would have. So making sure that as they go down the slide, they aren't going to encounter anything hard or dangerous that would be significant impact and cause an injury. So particularly in these cases when we're installing boulders, which is a hard component right next to the slide, from the construction aspect and the design aspect, this is something that we really have to focus on during construction to make sure we're meeting those requirements and have enough space there.
Okay, Ben, it's going to talk about life cycle of wood.
Oh yeah, this is this is a fun one and a mystery
Boring.
to a lot of us. This is Westmoreland. That in the left picture was when it was completed in 2014, and now you can see in 2021 the condition of the logs, which is a lot of what is considered sapwood, which is that outer layer of wood is rotting and needs to be replaced. I'm working right now with actually Portland Parks and Recreation, evaluating the species and treatment that was used here and what other alternatives there are to increase that life cycle, because we've determined, it's obvious that 7 years is just not a good life cycle for an investment of this size. Some of the lessons we've learned about using wood in play areas like this is that just there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to logs, how they were harvested, what were their growth conditions and their rate of growth. Their rate of growth relates a lot to like the outer rings of the log. So the greater the spacing the outer rings are, the faster it grows, the more susceptible it will be to rot. Also, how well was the log dried and how quickly. A lot of times kiln drying will create long linear cracks called checks. And oftentimes, you can't see inside the log, so you don't know if there's a fungus or rot. So we've leaned more towards sourcing logs with experts that actually their job is to source logs. I always do not recommend projects that a neighbor's tree fell down. Can we use that for nature play? And it's like, maybe if you're okay with putting the log on the ground and letting it rot, which is nature play. But for Westmoreland, it was a pilot project, and we wanted to provide something that was really iconic and deliberate for a lot of play value, but also, it was also an art installation. We worked with an artist to come up with the theme of the log jam in the river next to the salmon bearing stream, which was the the creek that was just restored about the same time the project was built. Other lessons that I've kind of come across with this installation is thinking about doing a little bit less. You know, you don't need to have an installation of 27 logs to make something great. You can, you know, do a couple, you can do a smaller installation with 3 logs, and hopefully we figure out the life cycle issue, and so that investment is worthwhile.
Thanks, Ben. So Stephanie's going to get into surfacing, which I think will shed some light and some information on lots of playground design. So Stephanie.
All right, so as I mentioned at the beginning, we are a general contractor that installs playgrounds, play environments, and also surfacing materials. So these are all my opinions, lessons learned, and perspectives from our years in the industry. So to begin, on the slide, we have engineered wood fiber, poured in place rubber, artificial turf, and rubber tiles as our 4 main examples. We'll dive right in. So engineered wood fiber we see is very common. This is the least accessible, not only in our opinion, but we 100% of the time will get feedback from neighborhoods, clients, users, you know, that this is really not meeting the standards for making everything easy to access. So getting right into poured in place, sometimes we'll see hybrid situations where we'll have a poured in place path with engineered wood fiber on the sides, just to help increase that accessibility. But poured in place, artificial turf, and tiles are the 3 that we consider really accessible, lower maintenance, and also, like I said, easier for everyone to access. So from a cost standpoint, engineered wood fiber is the cheapest. You can see on this slide that, you know, the rubber materials are pretty much equivalent. The artificial turf is getting up there as well. So much higher capital investment. But over the years, we have seen that engineered wood fiber requires so much more maintenance, retopping every couple of years, a lot of manpower to blow it back into place, rake it back into place, make sure that it's compacted properly, that it's, you know, high enough at all the transition ramps and high use spaces. So definitely the highest cost maintenance. So over the course of a 10 to 15 year period, you know, we believe that that's relatively equivalent to what you would have from the initial investment. Because, for example, poured in place and rubber tile, we don't get called back too often unless there's acts of vandalism or forces of nature. Poured in place is a little bit more susceptible to vandalism just because of the way it's installed and the way the granules are. You can see in these photos of the poured in place where they have different colors. You'll see where those colors connect, we call cold joints. Those are also susceptible to shrinking, expanding, contracting. That's what rubber does. So over time, there can be points of failure there. Same thing with rubber tile. Rubber tile can sometimes shrink up to an inch, you know, over a period of 15 to 20 years. So there are still some things to keep in mind just with the nature of rubber, but we have very few returns as far as maintenance goes. Artificial turf, similar, the calls we get back, vandalism if someone tries to light it on fire. But again, they're all very resilient in that respect. If they do get damaged, you cut it out, patch it back in, you know, no one's the wiser. So, you know, the rubber and the turf, again, they still do have some recommended maintenance from the manufacturer. Nothing is truly maintenance free, but like I said, as a contractor, we infrequently have to revisit those sites. So just to kind of sum up the warranty pieces. So engineered wood fiber, you know, that's not even a warranty thing in my opinion, but poured in place tiles and turf are pretty equivalent in their warranties are diminishing. So, you know, a turf product may have a 15-year warranty that is for, you know, the product surviving against standard weathering. Again, it diminishes over the years how much the company will replace the actual products. Board in place because of the glue, the binder that's involved with the rubber. You know, depending on what glue you purchase, that can give you a 5-year or 10-year warranty, again, against UV degradation. And the rubber tiles are similar in that respect. So installation, you know, is usually 1 year unless clients specify something else. But they do all have a very long warranty period to protect against weathering. So.
Thanks, Stephanie. So Ben's gonna talk to us about the different play structures and cost comparisons.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, costs for play structures vary greatly. And oftentimes we select equipment, whether it's nature play equipment, custom designed, or something out of a catalog. We often work with, or any designer will work with, the budget given. So it's like, if you have a Ford Focus budget, we're not going to go shopping for a Lamborghini for you. And you can see here on this slide, there's a lot of different cost variables. So on the left, the two pictures on the top and bottom take up a similar footprint. And the log structure above, that's a material cost, so not installation, is about $45,000. And the same footprint, a traditional structure that, probably resembles a lot of play equipment around the area, is $77,000. Interestingly enough, that play structure on the bottom left was installed probably like 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, that structure cost $37,000. And I asked the fabricator, well, what is that in today's dollars? So it increased quite a bit, almost 2 times as much in 10 years. And then you can see too, like in the middle, comparing the upper log structure, that's a pretty dynamic piece of equipment, and a lot of people would get excited to see that, but it's really expensive. You have long logs there that are locust, that are likely harvested in the East Coast, and then a steel slide that is manufactured in Europe. And there's probably a lot of fasteners and whatnot that are not in a local fabricator's plant that's next door, but a lot of times you consider, how hard would it be to replace something that needs to be replaced, and all things need to be replaced, whether it's nature play or not. Like that log structure on the left, there's some handholds that I could see probably would have to be replaced from time to time. The nature theme structure in the middle on the bottom, it takes up a much smaller footprint than some of the other pieces, and it's a little costly just because it has much higher end materials, like the faux concrete that looks like logs. And then embankment slides, Stephanie showed this image previously. It's not the slide itself that's expensive, which shows about $10,000 here. $10,000, but the boulders themselves are quite costly. These are columnar basalt columns that come from Moses Lake in eastern Washington, and the boulders themselves probably aren't expensive, but the delivery from Moses Lake is expensive, and the heavy equipment used and the time. They probably took the better half of 2 weeks just to get those boulders right, and that's a lot of labor hours, and they had to go back and chip a lot of the edges just to make sure a lot of the sharp points were taken out. So it's all about economy of scale, and what the community desires is what we end up either picking or custom designing.
Thanks, Ben. One last consideration is diversity. So diversity in equipment. So whether you have nature play with traditional play or different surfacing. So, in this picture, we've got turf mound with chips. So that's something that can help with budgets, but also just having that diversity alone. So we do have an example project we will go through this kind of quickly because I know that we want to save time for questions. So the first, this project example is DC Latourette Park. So this park is in Oregon City, and Stephanie and her team installed the project. This park is a neighborhood park, so it's a smaller park within a neighborhood setting. It's about an acre total, including the basketball court, but the playground footprint itself is 2,700 square feet. And this is a combination of natural materials and traditional materials. So I'm going to let Stephanie talk through the next 2 slides about this project and the design and the install. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so we, like Jennifer said, we installed the log structure, the swings, and the important pieces here for us are kind of like I was mentioning before, the safety zones, the anchoring, the attachment methods, the footings, making sure that those are all parallel to the manufactured equipment in intention and follow through. And the other piece of the custom component of the logs is, you know, are things age appropriate? Are they set at the right heights? Again, using those guidelines. Are we aware of entrapment points and use zones, and that there's this composite continuous play component, but making sure again that we don't have anywhere for kids to get a foot stuck or you know, hardware that is protruding or anything like that. So a lot of that has to be kind of custom done on site in order to deal with the organic nature of logs in that respect. And then, you know, I mentioned the slide example with the embankment slide, again, making sure that those boulders and everything on the side and the use zone, the fall zone down at the bottom, everything is free and clear from any of those non-encroachment zones. So those were the main focus points of construction.
Thanks, Stephanie. So one thing about this park, you know, it's small, but it was designed with that intention. Ben and Stephanie have both mentioned, but also one thing we discussed while we were putting this together was like, could it have been better? And 2 items that we said yes, it was that one, it doesn't have the poured in place rubber or tiles, and then also it could have more or it could have ground level sensory features. So our last slide is just to show you some projects around town, around the metro area, but then also looking at total project size and then cost for features, and then compared to our, or not compared to, but showing you like our 3 parks that we're looking at today in Milwaukie, which is Scott Park, Balfour Park, and Bowman Bray, and their size, and currently the construction budgets for those projects. Just to give everybody kind of like, you know, an understanding of how much these parks can be, and then also their sizing. So that concludes our presentation. I do see that there's questions in the Q&A. So Adam, did you want to, I don't know if you've been able to answer any.
No, I am not able to answer any of these questions. I think we should start at the top with Lisa Gunyon-Ranker's question.
Okay, so I think you can you all see my question? Can you see my questions right now on the screen?
I can see the participants' questions.
Okay, so Lisa's question is, Stephanie, are there issues with quarter-minus surfacing use, such as for play area and pathway use?
Quarter-minus. You know, it's the feedback on that is that I have covered a lot of it with artificial turf. In my experience only, I think it's a beautiful in concept, and but it gets kicked around and the children move it and it doesn't stay put. So in some smaller places, we have just gone over it with artificial turf. So
Yeah. Oh, Adam, you're going to say something?
I have a question. What is quarter minus surface?
Oh, Stephanie, you can take that one.
oh sure, yeah. Quarter minus is a small ground rock that is used for compacted pathways instead of wood chips or asphalt. So
Yeah, be an angular small
yeah,
stone.
angular rock.
Yeah, so it's usually used for pathways because of the size is much smaller and it compacts so it can be accessible versus like, the old Forest Service gravel roads are done with 3/4 minus. So the largest rock is 3/4 inch all the way down to 0. Quarter minus, the largest rock is 1/4 inch all the way down to 0. And Stephanie's right, like in Cooch Park here, this is an example. We had some gravel surfacing around the base of the horse chestnut tree, and day one, the quarter minus rock migrated on top of the rubber surfacing and just started eating away at it. And so if you're going to use quarter minus adjacent to any rubber surfacing, you want to make sure they're pretty far apart. But you can't use it for safety surfacing. So it would because it doesn't have any impacted attenuation.
And just while we're kind of on that topic, can we maybe just address a little bit when it comes to accessibility of quarter minus or other sort of gravel for pathways?
I mean, we use it all the time. It's really like how it's graded. Can you attain cross slopes? Cross slopes being like you're walking in this direction and the cross slope is the angle that's going perpendicular to you. You can't exceed 2% cross slope. And so oftentimes gravel can move around and change, and you can't exceed 5% longitudinal slopes of the direction you're going. So that does require some level of maintenance to make sure that your slopes are remain, in high traffic areas. That's why like concrete and asphalts are resilient and can have more control over the grades you set and stay at those grades you set.
So if I'm hearing you right, we can make them accessible for people with perhaps mobility devices. However, they do require a lot more maintenance, perhaps frequent maintenance to keep them accessible. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. All right, I'm going to go on to the next question. I have seen some literature that indicates that artificial turf is often contaminated with PFAS, forever chemicals. Does certified PFAS-free artificial turf exist?
That is a great question. And I am not, unfortunately, the sales rep with all that documentation in front of me, but I could look into it.
Yeah, I mean, we're a phone call away from the people that know the answer to that. I know the infill that you often see on like soccer fields, are like the black pebbles. And in playgrounds, the infill is different and it's less toxic. I think it's called envirofill. But as far as the grass itself, I have not heard. But
No.
we will die. Well, not me. Jennifer will dial a friend.
Great presentation. I think you touched on it a little with local versus long distance fabrication, but has anyone looked into the life cycle of GHG emissions of each of these structures, including replacement and maintenance?
I mean, some of the prefabricated equipment from the higher end companies have better literature on the whole cradle to grave components and recycled components. Like that picture that I showed too,
Which
that
one?
of the structure that went from 37,000 to 77,000. That was a fabricator in Vancouver, Washington. So maybe, I mean, you're not going to be spending a lot on emissions, or you're not going to get a lot of emission carbon footprint, but maybe their metal is, you know, not quite as done well, or their plastic isn't recycled. So there are so many variables when it comes to selecting stuff like this. And then, you know, how long is it going to last and be replaced, and what does that cost? So, I mean, it would be a lot to go through, I think, to really suss out all of that. But my gut is, and my experience is that the higher end American made equipment is going to have much more literature and legitimate literature about that.
Thanks, Ben.
And just so everybody knows, GHG is greenhouse gases.
Oh, you're taking off the questions, right? Okay. Do the warranties that are offered include extreme weather that is coming due to climate change, or included the expected climate that is to come? That's a good question.
The warranties that I have read do not necessarily have any extreme condition. You know, they still have the same basic warranty information that you'd have on a homeowner's policy, as far as acts of God and things like that. And so I think, depending on where you are, you know, in the nation buying a product, you would have a different perspective on things that would most influence you. But yeah, nothing specific about the upcoming climate change.
I've had clients come back and put or request cantilevered shade structures over embankment slides. I mean, what's interesting is I have a school project that was built that had a structure that had a plastic slide, and then an embankment slide that was steel. And both of them were equally hot, but I think because the embankment slide is kind of like a showstopper, and it's like a center of attention, there's more focus on that if it's hot than something that's attached to a structure that has a whole lot of other things going on.
That's kind of perfect, because the next question is asking how do each of these structures handle indirect sunlight or heat, and do the natural materials stay cooler to touch but see faster decay with hot weather? So
It's the natural materials. I think it's the wet weather that's worse than the hot weather, and it's
yeah.
the when in the shoulder seasons, when it's going from wet to dry, and the dampness of the wood. If it's in engineered wood fiber, that contact in the engineered wood fiber are the problematic areas. So a lot, even like those vertical logs in this picture on the top left, are sitting on concrete footings that have spacers on them. So they're hopefully not sitting in a pool of water.
Yeah, unfortunately, plastic and metal both get hot in the manufactured equipment. So
striking a balance between accessibility and natural elements seems challenging. Although I favor nature play elements, some of these playgrounds lack a feeling of being in nature. I would like to see more shade trees and a sense of discovery through plantings along pathways. Okay, thank you. Is the artificial turf slippery or rough for children's knees?
it can be slippery when wet on some of the embankments, but any material, poured in place rubber, tiles, I mean, they're all, in my opinion, going to have the same factor of slickness, especially in Oregon, on any kind of embankment, but no more so. And then as far as on the knees, I mean, I'm allergic to grass, so I love artificial turf in comparison to real grass. I have it in my front and backyard. So no, in my opinion, not any more rough on knees than you would have in traditional grass.
And one thing to note too is these safety surfacings children will hurt themselves on the playground. They will scrape their knees. Unfortunately, some could break their arms or whatnot. The whole purpose of the safety surfacing is to prevent long-term head injuries and concussions, because that's what it's there for. At least that's what they said in the training.
So that was all the questions that were in the Q&A. Yeah, so that's great.
We have maybe a couple more minutes. Does anybody just want to raise their hand if they have a question or comment? And Gary, I can provide you with some more information on PFAS, or we can have Peter or Natalie get you a little bit more on that, if that didn't answer your question. I do have one question while we wrap things up a little bit. Ben, can you talk a little bit about the benefits of unstructured play? That's something that I didn't really learn about until I was a little bit later on in my career.
Well, I mean, if you all of us probably are from a generation, and if you think about how you grew up and how you played, a lot of us may not have played a lot on playgrounds, but on the back 40 in the forest, riding your bike, making tree forts, I mean, that stuff is just golden for childhood development and confidence building. And more structured play is kind of it's much more deliberate and less open-ended, so there's kind of less of the confidence building and exploration and imaginative play that goes along the way with structured play. But it's kind of the culture we live in, where, like I said earlier, our roaming circles are small. There is no more back 40 in our neighborhoods. So we do the best we can to provide unstructured play and open-ended play where we can in these urban environments.
All right, great. And I just want to give a shout out to our Parks and Rec Board members who are here tonight. Allie, Gary, Martine, Virginia. Thank you all for coming. We also have still with us a couple of city council members and a number of our community members who are working with us on this project. For anybody who wants to stay involved in this project, we do talk about it monthly at our Parks and Rec Board meetings, and you can go to the city's website to learn more about that and hear more great information on not only this project, but all of our park projects.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Okay, with that, I'm going to end the recording, and thank you all so much for attending.